Hi and welcome back to Atlanta Music Critic. My name is Laird. Today, AMC creator William Ford will be talking with American composer and educator Adolphus Hailstork. Hailstork was born in Rochester, New York, and grew up in Albany, where he studied violin, piano, organ, and voice. Hailstork began his musical career in 1963, when he studied composition with Mark Fax at Howard University, Washington, D.C. In the summer of 1963, he attended the American Conservatory at Fontainebleau, France, where he studied with Nadia Boulanger. In 1965, Hailstork received a Bachelor of Music from the Manhattan School of Music, where he studied under Vittorio, Giannini and David Diamond, and in 1966 received a Master of Music. After studying under Owen Reed, Hailstork received his Ph.D. in composition from Michigan State University in 1971. He is Professor Emeritus of Music at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. Here is William Ford in conversation with composer Adolphus Hailstork.
You're on the beach.
Yep, that's me.
That's wonderful.
I live in Virginia Beach, of course.
Hey, it's great to meet you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
As I mentioned to you, what I like to do is try to understand how people who are at the top of their game got to be at the top.
I think you got the wrong address, right? I don't know.
Usually that begins way back when. As a psychologist, it's always interesting to me to find out how people got into it in the first place.
Oh, you're here to analyze me. Oh, well, okay. Good luck with that.
So far, I haven't found consistent reasons that people get to be where they are. But generally, if there are patterns, one, it has to do with a supportive environment. And the second has to do with people who were really important in their lives, who made it possible to get the motivation and the desire and so on to become musicians. So I thought we could start there with you.
Okay.
And see if indeed that's a pattern that you kind of share. You were born in Rochester, New York. In your childhood, how did music play a role?
It was everything. And once I got involved in music, that was it. That was a total consumption, consumed my whole life.
At what age would you say you got that realization?
Well, I had a music aptitude test in the third grade. The state of New York gave out music aptitude tests, and I took one and apparently succeeded in it. And they said, well, let's introduce this person to an instrument and see if he's interested in one of those. And so they took us to an orchestra concert, and I picked out a harp, and they handed me a violin. And, that's how my music began.
You started with the violin.
Yes, I did. Uh-huh.
And when you started to play, did you have individual lessons or group lessons? How did that work?
It was always group. And then I played in the grade school orchestra, and then the junior high school orchestra, and then the senior high school orchestra. Never got really good at it. So I could be a soloist or anything, because eventually I got into singing. Once I started singing in a local church, like a cathedral of All Saints in Albany, New York, and also I got singing in the junior high school, and the rest is history. That was a primary thing. Then I moved into piano lessons, and then eventually organ lessons, also at the cathedral, and that was it. For my piano lessons, I preferred to improvise rather than practice my scales and arpeggios. And once I discovered making up music, I knew I had found my niche.
What was the reaction to the people around you, your peers, your family, and so on, with regard to your dedication to music?
Positive, always positive. There's never, Well, really, you should have gone into construction work or something, or driving a cab or something. No, it's always positive and encouraging.
And the kind of music that you got into in the cathedral, I assume it was sacred music.
Of course, yes, yes.
And which instrument would you say you became a master of, or which instruments?
The pencil. Once I started writing, all instruments became a secondary consideration. But I took serious piano lessons and I took serious organ lessons. My preferred instrument, and the instrument I wish I had stayed at all my life, was the pipe organ. I love the pipe organ. So that's my preferred instrument. Besides, of course, ensembles that I wrote music for.
Had you begun to compose in the traditional sense, not improvise, when you went to college?
Oh, I had already been composing for quite a few years when I went to college, and I started in my junior year of high school, and then when I went to college, I just continued writing, and I never stopped writing.
Okay. Do you still have some of your earliest works?
I have a booklet, a notebook from 1957, the earliest I remember starting. Yeah.
And
I was a sophomore that year in high school. Right?
and when you look back on that, what do you think?
I'm thankful that, I grasped notation. Now, you have to understand, when I was in the cathedral choir, that's where I really learned how to read. I became cathedral choir's librarian, and after everyone departed every Sunday, I would systematically take scores out of the huge library they had and play through them, and that included open score reading also. I didn't know I was preparing myself to be a composer, but I had already that's what happened. I enjoyed that, and it was a pleasure for me.
When you went to the university, was it in music?
My first school was actually Howard University in DC. And by then I had already written orchestra pieces, choir pieces. Then I continued my 4 years at Howard writing music, wrote a couple little musicals there, wrote songs there, wrote piano pieces there. I just kept on writing, and I went there to study composition, and they didn't have an actual degree in composition. Their degree was in theory. So I got my Bachelor of Music in theory. Then after that, I went to the Manhattan School of Music in New York. And now there, they were not pleased with my just having a degree in theory. So they said, you have to get our bachelor's in composition before we take you as a master's in composition. So I spent 3 years there getting another bachelor's and also getting my master's in composition from Manhattan School of Music. Their program was very different for composers than for theorists. And a lot of schools offer studies in theory composition or composition theory or whatever. In New York City, at least in this school, you took a program either in theory or you took a program in composition. And the way they taught the composers was different from the way they taught the theorists. I wanted to be a composer. That's all I ever wanted to be. So I signed up for composition there. I was very fortunate to get into that school. Subsequently, I've become an honored alumni, and I even gave a commencement address a year ago. It's one of the really, really great blessings of my life. It's a fantastic story, because I hadn't even heard of graduate school before a woman asked me, where are you planning to go to graduate school? And I said, what's that? And eventually she said, I teach at MSM, the Manhattan School of Music, and maybe I can get you in there. She had heard a piece of mine. And I said, well, okay. And she talked to the administration, and lo and behold, they said, oh, here are the conditions. Do you accept them? I said, yep. And I spent 3 glorious years in New York City. And New York City is still within me. And my wife and I go back almost every month now because of performances. That's one of the good things that happened.
I read in your bio that you spent some time with Nadia Boulanger.
That's right. I did a summer, just a few weeks in the summer of 63. That's where I met the lady who asked me if I'd like to go to Manhattan School of Music.
Got it.
And I studied with Boulanger. It's just a short period of time, so I can't claim to really be one of her Aaron Copland level composers, but I, I learned some lessons from it.
Can you describe what it was that made her so influential?
Besides her charisma, the demands, the intellectual demands required of her students were towering. I mean, and daunting for some, I guess. She insisted on developing what I call the polyphonic mind. You must be aware of rhythm. You must be aware of the distribution of sound, which I think was one of the most important lessons of all, and a greater level of sensitivity and skill than I've ever seen anywhere else.
What was your very first composition to be played by a major organization?
Thor Johnson at the Nashville Symphony asked me to write a short piece for a collection he was putting together under the auspices of the J.C. Penney company. It seems like the chairman of the board of the J.C. Penney company wanted to get together 3 boxes of music to celebrate the bicentennial. And he ordered a collection of choral music led by somebody, and then a collection of band music led by somebody, and a collection of orchestra music led by Thor Johnson. And each of these leaders was given one commission they could give out. And Thor chose me to do the one commission piece, and I wrote a little piece called Celebration, and that was played by the Nashville Symphony and went on to its own pretty nicely received duration. And I mean, in terms of performances by different orchestras, it's a challenging little thing in 7/8 meter, and calls for skill. Is pretty nicely orchestrated and nice and bright and happy. Lately, it's fallen by the wayside in favor of other easier pieces. That was my first exposure to getting played by a major symphony.
As your career has moved on, and obviously it's been a long and distinguished career, how do you get your music played or attended to by a major musical organization?
The American Symphony Orchestra League shares, all the composers, arts administrators, et cetera, talk to each other. And word of mouth is the big thing in this business. And if you've had a track record that has gone on for as many years as mine has, then people look at what you've done. Now, every orchestra has its own needs and desires and personality. And sometimes they want, experimentalist composers. Sometimes they want kind of down-to-earth, accessible composers, which I would list myself as. With the current introspection, you might say, that the orchestras and various chamber orchestras and operas have had since the pandemic, thinking about, well, what can we do to expand our audience or open our doors more, then the abstract expressionist types are have had their day for a long time, but they're looking for more accessible, heartfelt type of writers, and that's what I am. So I haven't had any problem lately. In fact, I get a lot of performances. This year's like 14 different performances scattered through the season, and people know that I have skill. It's classical skills, it's traditional skill, and I write well for chamber, and I write well for orchestra. I write well for choir. So I've been approached quite a bit.
I listened to, just before we talked, your Symphony No. 1 as recorded by Joanne Falletta.
Joanne Falletta.
Yes. The way you just described your music is indeed accurate. It is accessible. It is something that one can listen to, and when it's over, you can say, gosh, I remember it, and I understood it, and it was affecting. We seem to be, at least in the US, moving back to that kind of accessibility that for several years we didn't do. Several
Right.
decades, actually, we didn't do.
Actually, you're right.
When you set out to write a piece, do you have the arc of the piece in mind, or do you start with the first measure and just build from there, or some combination of both, or some other way?
Well, I have a kind of a basic arc always in my music, which is, you begin in a hopefully in an arresting way. You continue in a way that sustains the tension, and you have a payoff of some sort that's made it worth the attention of the listener.
Do you carry a notebook around to write down ideas that later you could use? Sometimes
I do. Yeah. Lately, I haven't been. When my wife and I go out of town for a performance. Now, I used to always carry my music paper so I could spend my free time writing, but I spend 8 hours a day at the computer as it is, at least 6 to 8. Scoring pieces, editing pieces, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we go out of town, I go to a concert. I said that's my vacation. I got to get away from it. I happen to believe strongly in the power of the subconscious, and I know, and I review them consciously sometimes. The pieces are tossing around up there, and I'm still making editing decisions while I'm on the road. Sometimes I've written whole pieces on the road, just to keep myself from going crazy, because it's the music that keeps me sane, I tell people. So it depends, but mostly right now it's get away from it for a while. But when I come back, I'm refreshed and I'm eager to get back to it. And that's what I meant. Yeah, I like that. Oh, I don't like that. That's not as what I thought I had written, et cetera, et cetera. And it's fun.
Do you do all the orchestrations yourself, or do you?
I do everything myself.
All right. Yeah. Do you use any kind of computer systems to help you in that?
I use Finale.
Your music strikes me as very American.
Mm.
I'm not sure I know what I mean by that. If I tried to operationally define it, I'm not sure. But if I listen to yours against, for example, English composers, French composers, I'd know you were an American. Is that agreeable to you?
Oh, well, I hope I reflect some of American consciousness. I used to think that, okay, I'm going to try to do in this piece what a European composer wouldn't think of doing, because we are a different culture here in America, kind of screwed up right now. But the fact is, we are. I had Nicholas Flagella, one of my teachers, at Manhattan School of Music, used to say, everything makes soup, or it all goes in the stew. We are a big stew of a country, and right now it's kind of boiling and roiling all over the place. But we have our ways. But you can't say there is one American music, because obviously there are several genres of music within America itself. I don't do country and Western. I generally, I don't call myself hip hop or anything like that. If there are some inflections that are American, they probably mostly come out of my use of spiritual materials from the African American spirituals, and also blues. I love the blues. Those will be reflected in my music a bit, I hope.
There's a certain optimism about it, even though you're not always writing about optimistic topics. Your music does have that kind of optimism, even that, for example, Copland had, Gershwin had. There's a use of brass, I think, in U.S. music that's different than you might hear elsewhere.
Mm.
I can't specify it exactly. But as they say, it's like pornography. I know it when I see it. And
Gee, I hope you're not equating my music with that.
But and I think that's I mean, there is something to be said. That's part of our culture, and it's a reasonable thing that anybody embedded in that culture would be influenced by, whether consciously or not so consciously. I also noticed in your symphony the use of the choral component,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that was quite lovely.
Mhm.
So I guess some of your own choral experience finds its way into your work also.
Yeah, in the past 20, 25, 30 years, my most, I think, frequently requested pieces have been the ones I write for choral and orchestra, because of my training in writing for the voice, especially the choir. That's what I've acquired, no pun intended, a skill in doing, and I do effectively, I believe, or else they wouldn't be playing these things. There aren't that many, when we talk about writing for choir and orchestra, the number of pieces that are played by significant symphonies that use that combination really aren't very well. They usually go back. They'll start with Carmina Burana and go backwards from there. It's like it's you don't hear many things that choirs love to sing. Orchestras have a significant thing to do in them, et cetera, and that also address issues related to the American experience. I've got a kind of a mini corner on that market.
Are there other contemporary composers who you particularly admire? I know this is a difficult question,
It
because
is a difficult question.
if you name five, the second group will be offended that you didn't include them. But
The last composer I really flipped over some years ago was this young man, or not young now anymore, Macmillan, the Scottish composer. I like his work. First of all, because his percussion concerto quoted uses a chant melody in it, and of course I grew up singing chant, and so I was really attracted to that. He wasn't afraid of lyricism. I can't think of anybody else right now. I've been so wrapped up in my own self, so I guess I'm too self-involved to really wonder about what other people are doing that much.
How about composers in the past? Do you have favorites?
Well, I always tell people I like Ravel, and the French aesthetic, the colorations, and of course that might be influenced to some extent by having studied with Boulanger. But I always love Ravel. I love Debussy. I do like French composers. I like English composers, French, English, Slavic composers. Those the one avant-gardist I really fell for, because he had a sense of macro development and macro evolution of a piece, was Lutoslawski, the Polish composer. Those are some I like, but I do embrace English style, especially Vaughan Williams, French composers, and he was influenced by French composers himself. I was ravenous for a period of time over Richard Strauss and his fabulous orchestrations. I love good orchestration. I like Bartok. Oh, and my current and a composer I really like, and that I think about and listen to more than almost any of the 20th century composers, like Shostakovich. I think Shostakovich had the right idea. I mean, although I sometimes wonder if Stalin didn't do him a favor or crushed him, because I happen to think that some of his symphonies, written after being yelled at by Mighty Joseph, are exciting and accessible, those are two of my things I'd like to achieve. So I think the 8th Symphony is off the wall wonderful. The 10th Symphony is magnificent. And I like the 15th. So I am a fan of Shostakovich. And he wrote under trying circumstances. I appreciate his courage and his valor. Yeah.
I think I did a review at one point of a Shostakovich symphony. I think it was by the Atlanta Symphony. But anyway, wondering what his output would have been like if he hadn't had to deal with it.
I think he would have proceeded from the Fourth Symphony. It's interesting how he would have evolved. I mean, after the Fourth Symphony, wow, can you imagine what the Fifth? We wouldn't have had the Fifth, and the Fifth would have been more acerbic and more off-putting than the famous one that exists now. He would have been more grating on the ear. But you know what? I think that he might have still kept the people in mind. I think there are moments in Shostakovich where he's speaking directly to the people and for the people. That is, I think, a very important aspect of his music.
What about Prokofiev?
I like him. I like Prokofiev. I used to really like Prokofiev, and I thought he's the 20th century master who wrote well for everything, which is something I admire. I mean, he wrote good chamber music, orchestra music, all of that. I like him, but he doesn't touch my heart the way Shostakovich.
One of the characteristics of the English music, of course, is the pastoral quality of it.
Love that. Yes.
As well, they always seem to have to stick in a march somewhere in their music also.
I know. The Jupiter movement of all.
Is there something that you always feel compelled to put in your music?
No, there's nothing I feel compelled. I must have it in there. No, I can't say that.
Okay.
You know, that gets me to another topic altogether, and that's my hybrid culturalism, because I've written pieces that have absolutely no African-American inflections in them at all, and then I've written pieces in which I really strongly try to place or convey an African-American flavoring. I go back and forth between the two, and it's kind of a conscious decision because I refuse to be boxed into one or the other, you know, my European side or my African-American side. The other is that I really feel a sense of responsibility to try to, through music, to convey what I call the triumphs and tragedies of being an African-American in the United States.
Is there something that you'd like people to know that we haven't covered?
No, I like them to know my music, and hopefully they will have a positive reaction on some pieces. It's a joy to write. First of all, if I were to try to give any advice to young people, I said, find a field that takes energy and occupies you for your whole life. I mean, I started more than 60 years ago, and I've always loved it, and I'm still learning. And anything that can get you going and you can still learn and create for a long period of time, embrace that. That's really your calling.
I agree with you, and it's good advice. We only have 2.5 minutes left, but I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. We have several friends in common, like Joanne Falletta and Thomas Wilkins and Jeffrey Beagle. In fact, Jeffrey was the one who recommended that I should talk with you. So it is a pleasure to get to talk with you and get to know you more. I think my viewers will enjoy it also. Hey, thanks very much. Appreciate it a lot.
Sure. Pleasure of mine.
You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, William and Adolphus. For more information about Mr. Hailstork, go to www.adolphushailstork.com. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment below. Become a patron at www.patreon.com/AtlantaMusicCritic. If you would like to suggest someone to be interviewed by William, leave your suggestion in the comments below. If you would like a custom video using your photos or videos, drop a note to wef400@gmail.com. This interview was recorded via Zoom and all production was done by William. My name is Laird. See you next time, and by the way, I still haven't received that raise William promised a few videos back.